Hello everyone. Thank you for coming today. We are very happy to have with us today the wildly and wonderfully creative Matt Blackwell. So I know everyone here at the gallery has been very excited to hear Matt talk. So I will be very brief so we can get to that. Just to give you a little bit of Matt's background. So he has a BFA from the Portland School of Art, which is now the Maine College of Art, and an MFA from the University of North Carolina. He was recipient of the Marguerite Zorak Scholarship in Painting to Skowhegan. And recently, in 2005, he received a prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship. His work is in several museums, and most importantly, probably to us, he's got several pieces in the PMA, including this wonderful moose with fairy wings and little Day of the Dead characters running underneath, which I think Matt's going to talk about in a bit. So, without further ado, here is Matt Blackwell.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for coming out today, and thanks so much to Greenhut for putting this together. It's not always easy to do long distance shows, but they helped get it done, and I've got to thank my longtime significant other, Sue Canning, who I don't see, she's here somewhere, who lent me a copy. There she is, okay, you know, and my next trick will be, anyway, you know, there's no way I could get this done without her help. So I'm just going to talk briefly on the work, and I'm going to show a couple other pieces that relate to what I'm talking about, because things don't really happen in isolation. They kind of happen in groups, and we just kind of fill you in a little bit on my studio practice and how things happen. Talk about them a little bit formally and a little bit about the content. So, when they asked me if I would do this with Kathy Smith, I said sure, because to me, one thing that came to mind was like what Fairfield Porter had to say about painting when he was a critic, which was that the best things in figurative work are the abstract, and the best thing in abstract work are the figurative things, or the realistic things. So I just felt like it was a real chance for the paintings to talk to each other. And if I had stayed in Maine, I kind of feel like I'd have been making work like Kathy in terms of these beautiful grays and all-season landscapes that are truly Maine landscapes. I lost my status. I left in '86. I come back as much as I can. But, Maine is just a wagon I'm always going to drag around behind me forever, because it taught me everything. And it was such a great place to live here in the early '70s. So many poets, so many musicians, so many writers. I went to school at PSA, and I studied with Bill Collins and Ed Douglas, and I couldn't have lucked out anymore in terms of what I wanted as an education. I had a great high school art teacher who turned me on to expressionism, and I thought, if this is the window that my mom was a painter, but to me, without a trained hand, it was a window to come in through. Nolde, Munch, Kirchner, and I never left that really. So to study with Ed Douglas, who studied with Bay Area painters, particularly Richard Diebenkorn, was a great window to walk through. And it just made all the difference. I lucked out. So I kind of carried on in that tradition. I've been through various phases, but let me get on with it. And the first piece I'm going to show you is on the back wall. This is what I was doing on Mount Hegan in the early '80s. I was lucky enough to live out there with my then partner, the late married Barney, who introduced me to Mount Hegan. And it was a chance to go out to a place and work a little bit part-time, doing interesting jobs to support myself, but no more than 10 or 15 hours a week. so I could paint the rest of the time and go out and make landscape paintings. And I kind of felt like I re-educated myself in terms of, I needed to re-educate myself in terms of painting. I kind of crawled out of art school. There were so many wonderful distractions that I got a little bit lost at the end. And I know I wanted to up my game again. And Monhegan, with its great tradition, particularly guys like George Bell, was just a great place to go. But I was also looking a lot at French painting and looking at early Cézanne and early Pizarro's, kind of the first spirit of Impressionism. Just going out and painting, making plein air paintings, doing self-portraits, doing a little bit of figure work. And so that's the window I'm going to go in with when I talk about the work. And the first piece that I would point out is this woman who's in a pool with a green man back behind her. And you know, this kind of dips a little bit into mythology. It's a little bit about my past and about, you know, just feeling unencumbered, feeling free, going up someplace camping, just the joy of being outside, jumping in a river, you know, a fire at night, and just kind of the history of figure painting. That it's just a natural setting to drop a figure into that kind of a landscape. And you know, I believe in what different artists have said, and what William de Kooning said, is that oil paint was developed to paint flesh. I really believe that. It's like it goes on just like skin. And I put in the figure of a green man in there. I wanted some sort of a folklore reference. And that's from my past too, and it's from my association with Mary Barney back in the days of being around a lot of folk musicians who were just great players, living in Pownell during the winter time. These sessions that would happen at a house with all the local great traditional players who live up here. They'd come in and blow the roof off the house. Plus, every once in a while, they'd get somebody from Philadelphia who would come in. And just, it was rich. There was a lot to draw from. But I didn't know how to synthesize all that stuff back then. And it took me years. This is probably from 2005 with a little bit of reworking. You know, things that happened 20 years before show up in paintings. It's like I'm able to reference them. I'm finally able to put them into paintings. It started from a photograph, and I find that a little bit of a difficult process, you know, to not just be copying a photograph. I kind of lick it off to the side so that I can just use it and work from it, but not be ruled by it. Because to me, that proves to be tedium. So I kind of work it up like I'm looking at a landscape, which is just filling in puzzles and, you know, a white ground and fill it in till it gets full. But I also, you know, work up the other figures and probably change the foliage around a little bit, expanded the view, because it's a view I know. It's a special spot, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this spot when I'm in New York. So that's kind of what I'm showing you, is my longing to come back and look again and re-experience and come back to get rejuvenated. There's never enough time. I can't tell you how many figures I cast with John Ventimiglia. I never kept any of them. I kept a few heads, but the figures, they just left. So it was such good schooling in terms of knowing the figure. So kind of couple that. That's why I stay with figure painting in terms of landscapes. I'll talk about the various places as I move along here. You know, this is another one that's worked up from a photo, and it's similar in terms of a figure in a pool. And it's like I have a lot of them. And sometimes I'm working just on paper, and just sketchbook paper. Sometimes I go over the top of my notes because it's a relief to not have a white ground. To just bust into it, there's already something there. And it's like it starts looking good. I'm not doubting it from the start with one piece of white, you know, one piece of yellow paint on there. It's like, oh, okay, you know, it's like a safety net in a certain way. It works well, eventually it gets filled in. And sometimes the notes are in there. And I don't mind that either, you know, if it says olive oil, cat food, you know. I have books that are just full of that. So, you know, that kind of wordplay, and it's all part of it. It's all part of it. But, you know, the idea of like a figure in the water and just how the light plays on the figure, how it changes, how it distorts the figure. A lot of people do it. And I never get tired of it. And I never get tired of swimmers. I'm a swimmer myself, so it's like, it's always entertaining to be looking at swimmers under the water. And Ed Douglas is doing a great job over the year. You know, he's made some fantastic paintings recently of painters. So I just mentioned that. And I also mentioned, you know, the late Edie Tucker, who, my brother knew Edie Tucker from the folk music world. And we came up, and that's how I came into Maine in maybe '73. I spent maybe 3 or 4 days at her house and was able to check out the school. And so, you know, she was such a great help to so many people. You know, as I talk about this, you know, having Ed Douglas as a teacher, it introduced me to all the Bay Area painters who, for me, touched me in a really, very real kind of way. The early German expressionists seemed a little blown out of the water to me, but those guys seemed so personal in terms of what they had to tell you. David Parker, Albert Bischoff, Joan Brown, all great painters, but you know, a few things that they had to say. I've done quite a bit of reading, and my favorite saying is from Diemenkorn is, "Be careful, but in a perverse way," because then there's opportunities to things to come up in the paint, and the dialogue inside the paint of what paint intersects, which is what you see in Matisse, certain edges and things. I don't think that it's that true in this one, but you know, it was a great help. But also Joan Brown, she came through Skowhegan in '80, and she just creamed me on a painting that I was working on, and but she was really kind too, and she said, "Just make it funkier, just make it funkier, and more about the paint." And it was a great help to me. So those artists, they've guided me. You know, I'll move on to the next one, which I think is a little bit more of a jump in terms of paint handling. This painting with a woman with a bear, which I have a whole series of these kind of things. And you know, it was more about invented paint and kind of an invented landscape, no source, just work it up, just move paint around. You know, sometimes I work from photos, and other times I just want to free form it. I just want to see what comes up from pushing paint around. And I got kind of stock figures that have shown up, one of them being this bear and this woman. And it's like it came from a camping trip of getting like a cheap, one of those bears that looks on a child's lamp. You know, it's cast like this. But I got a plastic one. So I use it in my drawing class. There's hundreds of drawings of this bear. But I use it too. And you know, I can move it around. I know the arm can go like this. You know, do all kinds of things. But my friend, she got a Chinese Barbie called Susie Girl, so I put them together in a lot of different paintings. One of them's up at the Portland Museum of Art. So there's a big series of those things. Larger scale figures have come up, and this one's called the Cuckoo or Independent Republic, and it's just a figure that has a little green flag, which is like, to me, that would be the Independent Republic, and I got the idea from a Real Marcus book on Bob Dylan and the band and early recordings, early 20th century music, primarily from Harry Smith's collection for folkways. It's all these odd voices. It's all these odd voices of like family bands and jug bands and string bands and, you know, fife and drum corps from the 20s and 30s when anybody could make a record. Anybody could be a recording artist. And everybody had a little family band. So it's all this weirdo music, and I just kind of like that window. The idea that, you know, maybe, well, it's great to have the schooling and everything, but I like those voices, they seem authentic to me. So I wanted her to be out, and the idea of the cuckoo, there's a cuckoo that's in here that's flying down. It's kind of goofy looking, and it's, you know, one thing that I find is that you've got one thing sewn up that seems kind of real, then you've got a lot of liberty to move paint around. You can get away with murder, and I like to see what I can get away with. I like to start putting the paint down and see what happens. And you know, the idea would be kind of that you wouldn't see this figure ever, probably. it's like, she only comes out when you're not there, and if you look back in here, there's like a moonshine, there's like a little moonshine operation going on, and you know, it's a little counter. So that kind of relates to this too, and it's just the idea that these things could be going on, and the lyrics to the song "The Cuckoo" is, "You never see her till the 4th day of July," which would also tie into like an independent republic, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of whatever you like, whatever floats your boat. So I like these kind of heroic figures, and these figures, they're a little bit more on the lam. I'm not quite sure what the story is in this painting, but you know, it's a little bit on the edge of the town. It's not such a beautiful setting. Could be a vacant lot. Could be out by the thruway exit, and they kind of come out. And you know, I'm always wondering, are they on the lam? It's like, well, the bear's pink, so that's not very good camouflage. Maybe that's why they're out at night. And you know, it's just an excuse to make a pink bear. But you know, little things like this. There's a little star up there. Maybe that's a gas station or a convenience store that's over there. Maybe they're living out of that convenience store. You know, I like that a little bit on the edge that, you know, what's the story? They got a little fire in the background, and they come out into the light. And it's a lot more influenced by somebody like David Park, but also by German painters, especially contemporary German painters, who I really think take on some great issues. I don't like things that are completely stuck in time, particularly. I like it that maybe it can move on to the next step. Something else is going to happen. They're going to go do something else. They're going to go cook something on that campfire. They're going over to the convenience store, get some Slim Jims. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I had a teacher in North Carolina, a guy named Wally Barker, who studied with Max Beckman, and I really fell into Max Beckman hard. I always loved Matisse and loved Picasso, but Max Beckman, for me, all his paintings pose questions that can't be answered. So I keep coming back to him, looking at his plight, like losing his professorship in '33. The Nazis took it away from him, and he stayed on, but he could see the writing on the wall, and you see that in the paintings. They're kind of fraught. There's this dark energy in there that it's like, you know, he escapes. He manages to make it to Amsterdam and lives out the war there. The stress of it probably killed him a little too early, but he launched a lot of boats. And in fact, I think somebody told me that Bernard Langley spent a little bit of time with him at Wash U. So also Philip Guston was a great teacher. So I love Max Beckman, and I love that kind of theater that he puts forth, and his cast of characters. So I have a cast of characters. They show up. I have to watch that I don't keep using them over and over. Bear and the Woman, that's one of them. You know, but it's kind of made with, like I like these paintings because I can work it up with a knife, like just a medium-sized knife, a chip brush, you know, which you would paint sashes on windows with, just a good bristle brush, and a little brush, like three tools that it just gets right to the paint. And I love working with knives. I love putting on impasto, and I know I'm probably a whore to some purists in terms of oil painting, but I've got a space in the city that isn't well ventilated, so I can't put out a huge amount of turpentine for glazes. I love to look that way, but I've got to, you know, kind of stay straight linseed oil, so there's not a lot of transparencies. Paint tends to be kind of opaque and laid down. When I get a residency and I can open up a window, then I do glazes. So that's kind of how I work, you know, it's what there is. Go on to the next one, which relates to this, and it's like, this is the moose that's in the museum. And I'm not going to explain all the stuff in there except to say that I guess I kind of see it as like how Maine has changed in terms of like, yeah, everybody's going, you know, and it's all up for sale, and it's the invasion that happens in, you know, every May Day, or not May Day, but Memorial Day, and it's like, but this was the initial sketch, so That's, well, not even a sketch, it's an initial painting, which is kind of the kitchen sink on paper, painted up flat. I work that way too. I do a lot of work on paper just because it's easy, convenient. I like working flat, using tempera paint, liquid watercolors, ink. Might even have a little bit of oil in it. I can't remember. But, you know, to see the two versions. I just wanted the moose to be prominent because I've always felt like, I mean, you could just stop in the main turnpike anywhere. As soon as you come in, walk out into the woods on the north side of the road and die. It's thick, it's dense, it's unforgiving. It's like the animals that live there understand it, but you know, we're not that adept at it. You know, it's unless you're born to it, and I do know some people in Maine who are kind of born to this, who really know it, who really know how to operate in it. I just always found it a little bit daunting, but I like that. I like that nature's in control. So it's like barn owl. This is on paper, and it's an oil on paper. And it's mounted on paper because I find that that's the easiest way to show them. Dealing with, in the studio with works under glass, the glass gets broken, the frames get broken, it's just so much easier to just mount it on canvas. I found a method to be able to do that, and it's, you know, this just came off the internet. It's like a couple of years, I like animals and I like animal imagery. A couple of years ago I did an open studio, and I thought, what's the most ubiquitous thing I could do? A box of kittens. So I went online and I just, all these pictures of boxes of kittens. I said, okay, I'm going to make some paintings. These guys have some over here. But I did an open studio. Geez, I sold a lot of boxes of kittens. So it's like, okay. It was the same kind of the same thing with cows. It's like, up here, it's like, Margaret Myers, a great painter of cows. She has beautiful cows. She's right here. And I always thought that I could probably make a living just painting cows. And I like doing it, go out in the truck. Oh yeah, set up. Anyway, let me move on to the next thing, which is this painting that's back here called Lonesome Devil. And it's just a devil walking in the landscape. I do a lot of walking figures. I just kind of like the idea of a figure in transition. And, you know, it's New Mexico. My family, my surviving family has been in New Mexico for a while, so I go out to Santa Fe to see my brother, and my late mother was out there for her last years and had, you know, grew all kinds of ranches, so I just get to go out and look at New Mexico. And, you know, the significance of an object in New Mexico, if you put it out in the landscape in this huge expanse, to me it's really interesting, and I'm real interested in kind of native culture there in terms of like witchcraft or, you know, sorcerers. Not that I want anything to do with it, but it's interesting to me. And my brother would take me out to these little Spanish towns on about 30 miles outside of Santa Fe and drive me around, show me places, and it made a huge impression on me. I could recall him. To work up a landscape, it's another one that's worked up and kind of a walking figure. You know, the devil's got the blues, there's a black cloud over his head. It's a terribly lonely job to just continue to work evil, you know. You know, we kind of have seen that, you know, we're witness to that now. It's very isolating. You know, you can have delusions. So, you know, there's a big X on there, there's a couple X's, and, you know, they kind of symbolize where you would sign your name to get what you want. It's like to go with the devil, okay? So the devil shows up in the painting, and I think it's an important element to drop in. But I also think that the head on that devil showed up from a papier-mâché devil head that's in my classroom. That's the most benign devil you've ever seen. You just have to like him. He's nice, and the skeleton that I have in the classroom, he's missing a head. So at the end of the semester, I make a big setup. It's a whole still life. It's related to the painting that's in the window. Winter Pulling Spring's Leg. I make a massive setup, and I put that devil's head on the skeleton. And I've got a lot of kids from Central America and a lot of kids from Mexico, and they're like, you know, they get it. You know, we kind of talk the Day of the Dead kind of thing. And we get of skulls and a bunch of wine bottles and put them around. And I kind of make it for myself. I work from them later. But, you know, they get to work from them too. So that's another method that I work. It's like installation. But I'll talk about that with the last painting, which we can't even see. The isolated figure walking on the road. Portland Museum bought this from me from biennial, 2 biennials ago, of a man walking from summer into winter. And I did it at the Vermont Studio Center after 9/11. I just really wanted to get out of New York. They had an opening. They said, "Do you want to come?" I said, "Sure." And it was a warm fall, and I think I had a knee that was bothering me, and we're just kind of limping around and going up in the woods, like even up into November. And I just kind of felt like this guy carried all the baggage of that event. And you know, it's just going to just keep spiraling. So it's just like him walking along the road, carrying that, and I call it winter stealing the sun. And you know, I don't know if he's stealing it, if he's a thief, or whatever, but I like these walking figures. And I kind of got the idea from George Baselitz. He did all these hero paintings in the 60s before he turned everything upside down. And a lot of times they're soldiers, and it looks like they've come back from the war. He's really dealing with what happened in World War II and the whole collective memory. But I love those paintings, and you know, I just thought, before that was Nathan Oliveira, The Man Walking. Everybody kind of did that in the Bay Area, but I just thought, you know, figure walking and transition. But I think that it still rings for me too, and especially in terms of like the refugee world, that it's like that's ever gaining. And more and more people are displaced, more and more people are homeless, more and more people need a place to go. And you know, so for me, it still resonates in that way. I like it if they would read a lot of different ways. You know, you could also just read this kind of blues influenced, kind of man on the highway, man on the road. I'm really pushed and pulled around a lot by that kind of music. And kind of lost figure that you'd find in like Russell Banks, in terms of writing, Russell Banks, Cormac McCarthy, can't think of the other writers, but I'm pulled to that kind of work. But in terms of that, you know, specifically, it's like it kind of cues me into a band song, which I used to sing in a jug band, so I'm just going to read it to you. It just goes like this. Picked up my bags and I'm looking for a place to hide when I saw Carmen and the devil walking side by side. I said, "Hey Carmen, come on, let's go downtown." She said, "I gotta go, but my friend can stick around." So it's just kind of like, that song always resonated with me, and it's funny, and it's just kind of like, you know, it's kind of like street life, and how it used to be to even live in Portland at a time. Okay, so I'll go to the next one, which is Manifesto, which is back in this nook. And again, it's, you know, I think it was a found canvas that sometimes, I live in a building that sometimes spits out art, unfinished art projects that have hardly been touched on. But the canvas has been around for a while, so it's like I started repainting it. It gave me a devil of a time. It's been a lot of different paintings. It wasn't clear as it should be, but it worked itself out in terms of it becoming a painting, and a painting of something. And the setting was kind of set for me. It's up in Golden Colors, up in upstate New York. I had to do some repair on a cow that I sold in the sculpture. And it was kind of what I was looking at. They had some tamarack trees in the background. And there was a figure, and it was a field, and it was all these other different things. Finally, the figure ended up here, and you know, it's her manifesto was in her hand, and you know, it might be the 11th commandment, which I can't say to this room, but I'll whisper it in your ear if you want. And it says up here, her message. She points, and it says, "More pasture than future," which is where I'm at. And, you know, that time is short. And, you know, particularly with the Women's March in New York, like 2 years ago, that it was an amazing thing to witness. The roar of that crowd coming up the avenues. Wow, I've never witnessed that before. And so many just everyday people coming out to voice their opinion. And so strong that I thought, especially with the Me Too movement, that it's like, yeah, you know, she should be standing out there. But it also made me think, I read a story about the time that I was working on this of Pete Seeger going out from his home in the Hudson Valley with a sign on a stick down to the state route below in the wintertime and just holding it up. It was about the war in Iraq. And just that solitary protest, that it's like, wow, good for you. You know, just leave the warm house, go down to the road, hold up your sign. So I thought, well, you know, who's she protesting to? It's just more about an individual act of protest. And it's like, some of my work deals with that. Because I've got a lot to vent these days, and you know, I'm not being real particular about it, but I think I like the forms in it. I like this. It's like I can't figure out if it's a tree or a figure, or a house, and you know, is it on a branch or is that a leg? You know, it's like I like that ambiguity of form that, especially you get in early Diebenkorns. It's like, especially the stuff from Albuquerque, you can spin those things around if you have a book and look at it from all four sides. You know that's what he was doing while he was working on it. And it keeps me going, and there's all kinds of little hidden things in there. You know, he might be viewed as a little bit humorless, but no, there's all kinds of good things in there. And, you know, there's a deer over on the side here, and I kind of want you to, in a painting like this, is just take time and look at it over the years, and you'll see things over time. I don't think that everything gets revealed at once. I want it to be repeat viewing. I think that that's what I want from a painting. I hardly have any room to view anything that I make. But things get reworked, and at this stage, it's like not so much new work all the time, it's like maybe the old work needs to be better. To that, and this is one that was maybe going to come up here, but it's just called Paradise, and it's a woman with a turtle. It's a little 20 by 24 painting, and now there's various figures that are set around in there. There was this prominent orange figure, the great orange one was back here, and he was prominent. And I finally, at one point, I just decided I don't want him dominating the picture. It's like, let's paint him out, let's exclude him from it. Because the simple pleasures that we might know in our day-to-day life, what would he know about that? You know, he is excluded from that. It's like, you know, going out and sitting out at two lights, that's not part of it. And, you know, all that stuff is for free. All that free stuff that we get, because we notice it. Okay, so enough of that. I go on to the next one, which is this painting that's over here on this wall called Empty the Bag. And, you know, I don't know where I got the title from, but I think it's kind of like jazz titles. There's a jazz tune that I'm not sure if Roland Kirk wrote it or Charles Mingus wrote it. It's called Gash Your Wig. And I always thought, what does that mean? But it's a great term, and I love it. It's like, okay, I'm ready to do it. So this one's Empty the Bag, and it's like, it's really about, you know, letting go of things, the things that happen in your life and moving forward. And that she empties out that bag, and behind her is a figure that holds the world on its shoulders. It's kind of an Atlas figure. It's kind of a cat. It's kind of human, and it has something on a T-shirt that looks like almost like a figure of Christ, which I think I kind of got from Rodin or Gustave Moreau or one of those strange symbolists, you know, that, okay, yeah, that'll work in, but that's also from Sue's study of like her looking at those things. I see it out when I'm over there. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll work that in. And then, you know, things fall out of the bags, chicken heads, palette scrapings, the orange one is in there. You got to add in a little while ago, and you there's a little sign on the side of the road that's bent, but she's moving on, and she's dumping out that bag, and the setting to me feels a little bit like maybe New Orleans or something like that. It's got a little gree-gree in it, a little bit of gumbo, and maybe a little bit of sorcery, but good sorcery. And that's kind of the bag. That's I like that mystery. And I made the painting. Probably started the painting in 2009. Languish. It goes back into the stacks, and then it shows up again. You do some more work, and then over the last year, that blue that's in there is a phosphorescent blue that I got from Williamsburg Paint, which is just this beautiful color. You put it over the top of black, it just glows. So it's like, that made the painting, it was the last thing that I did. So, you just have to just keep looking at things and thinking about possibilities. And you can't see it, but some of you can't see it, but it's related to this too. It's another painting of a woman on a horse, and it's called It Just Falls Away, which is some sort of desert landscape with her spiral. It's a lasso of truth or whatever, but it's got this spiral on it, and it's I wanted to kind of mystify you, and the horse is kind of a burro. It's not very pretty, and she's headed somewhere, and then these things fall away, and it's it's like a star in a box, a lost glove, kind of the orphans of life, or you can't keep a star in a box. And, just stories make themselves. Paint suggests certain things, which is probably the most literal painting that I got in here, which is just called Brown Dog. And it's from Jim Harrison, a Native American guy in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, who hunter, trapper, likes to drink, just happy in a 50-degree cabin, knows where everything is in the woods. Funny little stories about he's out fishing and a bear sits down the riverbank in the same position as him, leaning against a tree. It's like, I believe that could happen. Jim Harrison was a great fisher, hunterman, poet, chef, and it's just the story of this guy. And anyhow, he has a bearskin that's stolen from him, and he has to go out to LA to get it back. And it's kind of class warfare. He gets it back, but then he's in trouble, and he figures out that his best disguise is to put on a green janitor's outfit, and then he's invisible to everybody. He makes his way back, but it's a great story, and it's one of those quick error paintings. It was so vivid, the character, that I don't think it took me more than 3 sessions, and it was all there in the first session. It just needed to be refined a little bit. So in terms of like painting, I'm going to talk about this much, but like just moving paint around and laying it down and layering up. My favorite thing is to cut in around the outside of things. It just changes form. I like that the best. But that kind of outsider figure, I really like that. And it's been kind of my shtick for a while in terms of the outsider character, somebody living some sort of an independent life. And it also relates to this painting, which is a bigger painting, probably 60 by 48, something like that, which is just called Vet, which I was just thinking about somebody in the North Country, of anywhere in the North Country, New Hampshire, Maine, upstate New York, just somebody who gets by. And, I just kind of think that that kind of life is imperiled, that it's like harder and harder for people to live, and it's made people desperate. It made them make poor choices, sometimes in terms of politics. And, I think that that's the most daunting things in terms of figuring out how to help people. That education, job training. It's like we really kind of need that to help people. I'm from a small town in western New York. It's the county seat that's pretty much dried up, and all the social services are there. But it's a beautiful little town called Lyons. And, I just look at it and I can see all kinds of possibilities. But it needs some benefactors. It needs some social programs. So anyway, that's another aspect of the work. And I'll go to this, I'll go to Girl and Goat, and you know, this painting just went on and on forever. Oh my God, I don't even know when I began it. I might have started in the 90s. And, it was an easy chair for a long time from a photo that I'd taken somewhere on the outskirts of Portland. But the only thing that stayed was this piece of wood, and you know, maybe that piece of wood, and you know, this Girl and Goat showed up in it. They became kind of stock figures, and then I wanted the goat to kind of cast a spell on you. So he's got this here. He's a magic goat, and you know, she's all dressed up, and they're all dressed. She's all dressed up with nowhere to go, but she doesn't care. She's happy. She's got the goat, and you know, that's kind of the story. You know, another band line is, you know, Time to Kill, What a Thrill, June and July. So yeah, I like those guys. In particular, a wellspring for me is the band's basement tapes, because they were listening to all that Harry Smith music, all those weirdo voices, but also Big Pink, which I've been listening to thousands and thousands of times. That it's like, it's hard to classify, but it feeds my brain. So that's, you know, there's a painting that's in the window. You can kind of check it out from outside. I taught for a semester down at Haverford College in Philadelphia. Really great students. I taught a mixed class of drawing and then sculpture, and the students were terrific. A lot of those students followed me into the sculpture class. They had a good shop. I'm not a great woodworker, but I can kind of do it. And we made a figure that we made figures that were had movable joints. We just did a little lap joint so they could be in action. And I made them choose a figure from art history, and particularly I pointed towards Bruegel and Bosch. And they bid on it. They went for it, and they made these great sculptures. But it influenced me like crazy too. So that painting that's in the front window, I think, is probably the most. I really was thinking a lot about Bruegel, and there's a few things that are borrowed in that. But it was a setup for a class in terms of like white cloth for snow, and you know, springs like being pulled by winter, which, you know, I grew up in Western New York, so it's like all I did was shovel. And then coming to Maine, well, winter's 2 weeks longer. But it's basically the same thing. So I wanted, you know, some sort of a goddess type figure that with the figure of the winter was my New York dealer in Thorpe. She has a great eye and shows great things. He had a vaudeville suit from the 20s. It was all made out of patches. And it's like, oh, I'm going to use that for winter. You know, it's a tired old act. So, you know, those kind of things happen. I'll give away one other secret in that painting is that the snow in it is bubble pack. That it's like I just painted on bubble pack and pressed it onto the paint. And it's, you know, this is similar in terms of, this is a large scale. This is 86 by 96, and it's sewn together canvas. It's a lot more kind of an upstate painting. It's called Lake Effect, which is the snow that I was shoveling. And it's kind of a map of New York State, and then there's an El Camino. And I'd seen this El Camino in Utica. It was slowly sinking into the ground. And I thought, there's a monument for you. And, you know, if you paint, if you put snow on things, it really unifies things. If you look at Grandma Moses, those things are really modified. And my mom was a painter, and it's like she liked Grandma Moses too. She had this kind of outsider thing that she did, even though being a good landscape painter, but she liked that too. So, you know, I didn't realize all this stuff had influenced me so much as a kid. It all gets in there. So this is the cow I was talking. I'm going to show you a little bit of sculpture. This is the cow that I repaired up in upstate. It's life size, and I made it at a sculpture residency, and made out of there's an armature of drywall studs underneath, and the outside skid is a ceiling tin. And then this was the canoe that I had at the Portland Museum, which lives in my hallway now. And but you know, large-scale sculptures when I was younger and stronger, yeah, sure, throw yourself at it. But after a while, it's like it takes up a lot of space. When I come back up, I make drawings, stay at Higgins Beach, make landscape drawings. I just kind of give myself over to it. So there's a few sketchbooks that are here. You're welcome to look through them. You know, it's like true believer stuff. It's either Western Maine or Higgins Beach, and you know, I do this one out in the rain, and it's the rain helped. So, keeps you loose. So that's about it. Any questions?
Do you ever really finish a painting?
You know, this is a good question. I mean, I think that at some point when it looks back at you, it's like that's the Cooling's answer. When it looks back at you from across the room from a certain spot where you want to see it from, then I feel like I'm done. You know, that it's like, I don't think anymore. I don't think any more paint should go on. I don't think that the form should be resolved anymore. That's always kind of the game. And it's like if it's looser, then that's a tough game. When is it convincing? You know, when is it finally convincing? It's a hard question. I've always fantasized that I could be like a 12-inch knife.
Right.
With but I need assistants. They have to mix up all the paint for me. It's got to be ready, like Takuni. His assistants, they mix it all up into coffee cups. He could just walk in and just start painting. And then he had a scupper underneath, where if the paint fell off, he could use all that stuff to paint on paper or to start a new painting. And you know, somebody was talking to me about that last night about glazes. And it was a great Munch show down in New York just a couple months ago. And you could see, you know, he had these outdoor sheds that he painted, and you could tell that the paintings were painted flat. There was so much turp on them that he did them outside and he let them lay flat, and he let that stuff dry up a little bit before he propped them back up in these big washy areas. And that's my fantasy too. I want outdoor sheds to have paint so I don't have to breathe the fumes, and paint flat with a big stick, you know, stand away from them. It'll be good. Anyway, thank you for your kind attention.
Rate yourself.
Yeah.